So I wanted to talk a little bit about line segments today. So for our textbook, this is section 1.2. You're going to be familiar with a lot of this, but I want to kind of hit some highlights, do a little bit of extension, and some review, especially there's a little bit of algebra review that's needed for this section. So when we talk about line segments are pieces of a line with two endpoints. So you're used to drawing these. Since these are endpoints, I name the endpoints the way I name all points. I use capital printed letters. Oh, I feel like using H and I. So that would be a picture of a line segment. When I want to write about a segment, I have different options. The most common one is that we use the endpoints and put a little picture of a line segment on top. And we can say segment instead of line segment. A lot of people don't include the word line when we say the name of this shape. I do not need to draw little points on the end of this. I just need to make sure there are no arrows, because points technically are really, really tiny, and a tiny picture with tiny endpoints on the end is tough to draw. So this is a little picture of a segment on top of the endpoints, and it's only the endpoints that are used. So it's always 2 points, it's the endpoints. The order does not matter, so I could also have called this segment HI. Alternatively, I can write out the word segment. So I could say segment HI. That is not a very common way of doing this. Almost always we're going to use one of these first two ways. One thing I want to note here, if you are using the endpoints and you don't want to write the word segment, you must put the symbol on top. If you do not put that symbol on top, it doesn't mean the same thing. I'm actually going to skip down here to length of a segment. If I wrote just this with no symbol on top, this means the length of segment HI. So one way to keep it straight is this is a shape, a segment. And this, with no symbol, is a number because it's a length. I will be very strict on this because there's a huge difference between talking about a shape and talking about a number. It is not something that you can just coast on and be like, oh, yeah, you know what I mean. Like, no, there's a big difference, because I can say something like the length of HI is 4 inches. But I can't say that about a shape. Saying a shape is 4 inches would be like saying, well, that hexagon over there is 4 inches. It's gibberish to say that. Or if I put the symbol on top here, I'm saying, again, a shape is a number, and shapes cannot be numbers, and numbers cannot be shapes. So because of that, we have an idea called congruent. Congruent means two shapes are exactly the same. So I could have two segments. So I'll still stick with HI. I'll go with BY here. I can say that segment HI is congruent to segment BY. And this is because shapes are congruent. The symbol for congruent, I can explain to you why we use this symbol for congruent, but it's going to have to wait until later in this course when we learn what that little squiggly actually stands for. But there's a reason we put the little squiggly on top of the equals. It's just going to have to wait a little bit. If I want to use an equal sign, equal signs are for numbers. Well, since these are segments, shapes cannot be equal, but numbers can be equal. And I could say the length of HI equals the length of BY, because numbers are equal. But in this course, since we spend most of our time talking about shapes, we want a way of saying the shapes are the same. We know that numbers can be the same, and that's what equal signs are for. We needed something to talk about shapes, and that's what the congruent sign is for. Oh, in a picture, if I want to show two segments are congruent, I put a little dash mark for them, and that'll show that they are congruent.